Good evening, everybody. It's always nice to be in a room full of people who know how to pronounce Chicago correctly. And yeah, you could clap. Yeah, and you know, my colleagues are, they won't admit it, and the vehemence of their denial is evidence. They are jealous. They wish they were Chicagoans. Rabbi Tatz, I happen to know personally, wishes he was an American. And, you know, they've given me, Rabbi Rockville, I don't know where, I didn't see him yet, but Rabbi Rockville has given me quite a bit of grief over the years, over the Cubs. And he doesn't know that when I do this, that means 100 years, right? And we're in a rebuilding century, but I could smell it. We're gonna be there soon. We'll be there. There's an incident, anybody who's been in Israel for any great length of time, like about 10 minutes, has an only in Israel story. I'm sure you have your only, something happened to you if you've been to Israel, something happened that you can't wait to get home and tell people about. And there was an incident in Israel, a man in Bnei Brak had to get to Yerushalayim. So he got into on the buses, he had a suitcase with him, and he put the suitcase in the baggage compartment underneath. And so, as things would have it, he opened up the baggage compartment opened up, and it was stuffed with suitcases. There wasn't enough room to put a suitcase in. So, in order to be able to manipulate the other suitcases, he actually climbed into the baggage compartment to adjust things. And, of course, the bus driver's view was blocked, and he hit the automatic button, locked him in, and drove with him from Bnei Brak to Yerushalayim. So, you know, the guy was okay, and, he was a little bruised up. But when he got to Yerushalayim, he made a phone call. Now, I could tell you if it was me, I would have called a lawyer. He got to Yerushalayim, and he called a Rav, called a rabbi to ask a halachic question. And his question, of course, was, does he have to pay for the ride or not? So the Rav told him that it's an impressive question. And he told him, since most people in the world not only would not pay for such a ride, they would pay not to be. 16-year-old seminary girl was actually locked in the bus company cannot charge on it. Now, he did not have to pay according to halacha. She had the presence of mind to call her parents. I always found the story impressive. You know, it's one of those, Mom, Dad, everything's okay, but which means it's not. Times and people have gotten locked in baggage. He said, Mom, Dad, everything's okay, but I'm in the baggage compartment of a bus. So they called the cops, and the cops stopped the bus on the highway. And you know, the way these things usually play out in Israel is, you know, the cops stop the bus driver, and then he says, there's a girl in the baggage compartment. You know, no, there isn't. Lo yachol liyot. No, they argue for 10 minutes till he finally, and then when he opens up the thing, she crawls out and says, Ma dosa shama, ma what? So it's not uncommon. In any event, I was actually enchanted by the fact that, you know, the kind of question that somebody, I mean, who would get out of a bus compartment then call a halachic authority to ask such a question? And I think that all of us know people and have seen people and have heard of events, incidents that people have been through, and we look at people and say, what a level this person's on. The person's on such an incredibly high level, and is there a chance, will I ever get to such a level? Am I myself on the way to such a level? And there's so many, you know, there's just an incredible story that took place. There's a little boy in a school, and he was picked on. A little boy, about 9 years old, was being picked on constantly by his friends. And they're making fun of him, picking on him. And the teacher in the school noticed that every time somebody insulted him, every time somebody called him a name, they noticed that the kid muttered something under his breath. And his father saw at home that the kid, every time his brothers picked on him, he muttered something under his breath. So, as you know, they both figured that obviously he's muttering something that he doesn't want them to hear, because then the picking will get worse. And every time somebody says something, again, he muttered something under his breath. So finally one day, the Rebbe in the school called his father and said, you know, every time something happens, I notice his lips are moving. His father says, yeah, same thing, I'm going to talk to him about it. Father calls him over, he says, tell me something, you know, every time you're picked on, we notice what are you saying? So the little boy said to his father, you know, there's a statement in the Talmud. The Talmud says, Hane'elovim veinam olvim, a person who is insulted and does not insult back. At the moment you're insulted, at that moment, your prayers are heard in heavens. At the moment you're being insulted and you do not respond, you have a special strength. Your prayer has a special potency. What I do is I go around to the local shuls where they have a list of all the sick people in the community. I memorize their names. And at the moment that I'm insulted, I then say a special tefillah, a prayer, for those people who I've seen their names on the list, because I know they have a special potency at that moment. It's a 9-year-old child. So we sometimes think in life, wow, there are levels to reach. There are levels that a person can attain. And therefore, again, there's always the question, what do we do? How does a person get motivated? Motivation's a hard thing in life. When I was about 19, my father took me out in the parking lot here. We were living in Chicago, learn how to drive a stick shift. We owned a Pinto. It's called the Deathmobile. They had a small minor problem. They get hit in the back and blow up. Other than that, they're great cars. Always had to find a parking space. And he took me out to the parking lot to learn how to drive the stick shift. And after about, 20 minutes, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't get the coordination. I was getting frustrated. I was getting flustered. Finally, I said, Dad, forget it. I'll drive the automatic. We had an automatic at home. And my father, wise man, should live and be well, he let me stew for a few minutes. And I tried it again. I still couldn't get it. After another 10 minutes, I sat there. And finally, my dad said to me, by the way, Mom knows how to drive it, right? Within 2 minutes, I was the best stick shift driver in the city, right? Wheelies, backwards, everything you want. Because all it takes a little bit of motivation. You just got to know which button to push. It takes a little bit of motivation. So we're always looking for motivation. What button can we push in order for ourselves to step forward and make those strides to become that kind of person, the kind of person who would ask a question getting out of a baggage compartment, kind of person, like a little boy who would say a prayer for other people when he's being abused. The Brisker Rav, Rabbi Zev Soloveitchik, was known for his meticulous adherence to the mitzvahs and his God-fearing, how always nervous, always worried that maybe he's coming up short in the service of God. Maybe something he's saying is inappropriate or something he's doing wrong. Somebody once asked him, how do you get to such a level? So Brisker Rav said to the guy, let me ask you a question. When you sleep at night, are you nervous that you're going to fall out of bed? He says, no. He says, you sleep well? Says, yeah, no problem. He says, you wake up in the middle of the night to check yourself, maybe you're by the edge of the bed? He says, no. He says, you're comfortable? Yeah, 100% comfortable. So Brisker Rav says, I got an idea. Let's take your bed, we'll put it on the edge of a 10-story roof. And then you go to sleep, no problem, right? He goes, no. He says, why not? He goes, well, I said, you're not nervous. He goes, I'm not, but, up there, if in case, just in case, it could be a problem. So Brisker Rav says, that's how I feel about mitzvahs. That's how I feel about my obligations to God. You're right. Chances are I'm not going to mess up. But what if I do mess up? It's eternal. If I mess up, it's not just a triviality. If I mess up, it's a big deal. And therefore, the Brisker Rav said that's his attitude when it comes to Torah, mitzvahs. That is the attitude that the Brisker Rav told this man. The truth of the matter is, I think anybody in this room, just by the fact that you're here, shows that you're on a high level already. Because obviously, if you're here, you came here tonight to be educated, inspired, to grow as Jews. And I think that many times we're doing very well. If you stop and think about all of the good things that you do, all the mitzvahs that you do, and it is important to pat yourselves on the back once in a while. You could even clap if you want. And you're doing well. There are a lot of things you do. Think about all the times you daven, the tzedakah, all the mitzvahs that you do. As a matter of fact, there was a guy was living in a non-Jewish town, some small town. Guy was living with his Torah family, and there were no other religious Jews in town. And his little kids, Yankee, Avi, Yitzi, and Yankee, were playing with the next-door neighbors, Bill, John, and Tom, who were not Jewish. Those were the playmates. There was nobody else around. So Christmas time, Mr. Murphy bought a tree. So he comes driving up to the house with this tree and calls his kids and says, Bill, John, Tom, help me bring the tree in. So, Avi and Yitzi and Yankee say, can we help too? He says, yeah, sure, guys, come on. So they start schlepping the tree into the house. As they bring in the tree, Avi says to him, well, how tall does the tree have to be? So he goes, oh, it doesn't have any specific height. Any height is fine. And they're put in, and Yitzi says to him, well, how close to the window does it have to be? And he says to him, it doesn't really matter. You put it in the middle of the living room. And then Yankee says, well, what if some of the leaves start turning brown? So, A Torah Jew, we ourselves realize, our children, in the home, what they see us doing in the home, everything that they see in the home is one mitzvah after another, it's one halacha after the other. Mr. Murphy said, what we make a big deal? Just a lousy tree. What's the big deal? A Torah Jew is doing so many things all day long, so many mitzvahs in the course of the year. So we're doing well. We're doing well. But there's always that desire. There was a guy, by the way, in an outreach organization in Israel. There was a dinner for many of the people who had gone through the outreach organization, had become Torah observant Jews, and they were sitting at this dinner, and at the end of the dinner, they brought out watermelon for dessert. So one of these people who had already taken such strides, made strides in his life, he was sitting at the table, and he took the watermelon, and he made a bracha to Hashem l'Elohim she'akol niyeh b'dvaro. So the outreach worker, one of the outreach rabbis, said to him, hey, it's great you make brachas, but the bracha on watermelon is actually ha'adama. He goes, I make a shahakol. He goes, I know, but the bracha is ha'adama. He says, but I make a shahakol. He says, okay, I'll bite. Why do you make a shahakol? He says, I was on the Golan Heights fighting the Syrians in the 73 war. And our platoon of tanks was surrounded by Syrians. We were goners and we knew it. And we were all secular. Nobody knew anything. We wanted to pray. Nobody knew any prayers. One guy in the division knew one thing about Judaism, knew how to make a shahakol. So he said, we all say made a shahakol. Somebody shot, knocked out a Syrian tank. So all you heard was, boom, and out goes the Syrian tank. He said, Rabbi, if it's good enough for Syrian tanks, it's good enough for watermelon. That's it. So, it's a great argument, but he's wrong. But at least he's trying. And I think that everybody here, I think that we're all people, we're all trying. So what is it that interferes, and what is it that when we try to grow as Jews, what is it that sidetracks us? So there's a remarkable statement the Talmud makes, and I think that of all the things that all the statements in the Talmud, I think every single person who's ever heard this, the statement in the Talmud, feels that it's speaking to him. You see, or her. Talmud says, ask the following question. What's going to be in the future? What's going to be the ultimate destiny of the evil inclination, what we call the Yetzer Hara? What's going to be the destiny of the evil inclination? The Talmud says in the ultimate future, God is going to shecht, he's going to slaughter the evil inclination. And everybody's going to stand around and cry. The righteous, the tzaddikim, are going to cry, and the wicked, the reshaim, are going to cry. The tzaddikim, the righteous, they're going to say, that incredible mountain, how were we able to overcome that incredible mountain? And the reshaim, the wicked, are going to say, that thin strand of hair, how did we trip time after time on a thin strand of hair? How were we not able to overcome? That's what the Talmud says. Whatever it means to shech the Yetzer Hara for a different time, that means I don't know. But the question that everybody asks, how could there be two views? Either the evil inclination is a mountain, or the evil inclination is a thin strand of hair. How could it be two? How could different people see it different ways? And the answer is such an insight into human nature. The answer is that there are two stages in any experience. There's the imagination stage, and there's the actual experience. If you think in life, you realize the experience rarely matches up to the imagination. A person imagines how something's going to be. There are countless examples. It could be marriage. A person imagined marriage is going to be great. Then he gets married. He says it wasn't quite what he thought. She thinks it wasn't quite what she thought. Although statistics have shown, by the way, statistics have shown that married men live longer than single men, but married men are more willing to die. So, marriage, person at the end of Yom Kippur, you feel at the end of Yom Kippur towards the Ilah, even though we are at the stage of spiritual giants, and we're still thinking about what we're going to eat and how much we're going to eat after Yom Kippur. Don't tell anybody, the guy next to you is thinking the same thing. And then, we got it all planned out. Then, okay, it was good. It wasn't what it was cracked up to be in imagination, that's for sure. Anybody's ever been away from their family for a long time? You've been away for a few months, and you're going away home. Plane is about to land, pilot announces fasten your seatbelt, your heart starts to thump. Soon we're going to be together, and we will be so happy. And then you get together, and within 10 minutes, you're ready to drive back to the airport. It's the same thing over and over. It's the same thing. And it's just not what it was in the imagination stage. It's just not the same thing. I heard about a couple once that spends months planning vacations. Months, brochures, lodges, travel accommodations. But they never go because they don't want to ruin it. They'd much rather leave it in the planning stage because it's never what it looks like. And so, the tzaddikim, what's a tzaddik? What's a righteous person? A righteous person is tempted, and he overcomes the temptation. Sometimes he fails, most of the times he succeeds. Every time he overcomes a temptation, he feels he's overcome a mountain, because that's what it looks like at the temptation stage. That's the imagination. He never succumbs, rarely succumbs, doesn't realize what he's given up. Whereas the wicked, the righteous, the wicked, the Rishayim, they're tempted, they succumb, and then they realize it was simply a thin strand of hair. There was nothing there. Therefore they cry. The tzaddikim cry when they remember the pain that they had to invest in order to activate their willpower to overcome. And the Rishayim, the wicked, they cry because they realize that they tripped again and again on nothing. It wasn't there. It was an illusion. That temptation, the imagery of that temptation was what sidetracks us, and our job is to try to figure out a way, how do we fight past it? So I want to share with you an idea. When I was in high school, we had a teacher, sophomore English class. He did not like us. We did not like him. And he had a couple of annoying habits. One of them was he spoke to us with his glasses. Somebody points glasses at you when they lecture. Right? But he had a different habit where he would periodically repeat the last word of a sentence. Sentence. Because he felt it made him look sophisticated. Sophisticated. So in a story that I could not make up if I wanted to, we were sitting in class one day and handed back our test papers, and he said, "Gentlemen, the problem with your papers is there was too much repetition." Repetition. So at least, I don't want to tell you what grade I got in that class. Of course, I was sitting in the front row and I always bit my lip off trying not to laugh. He was an ex-Marine who would have brutalized us if we would have. And, I couldn't make up the story if I wanted to, but I did take an important Musar life lesson out of it. There are certain things in life need to be repeated. And I'd like to share with you an idea that I think is so fundamental in every Jew's service, in every Jew's step, taking strides upwards to get closer. There's an idea in the Torah, everybody knows that mitzvahs are so detailed, valid. If a man wears tefillin, the head tefillin is not allowed to be down past the front of his hairline, where his hairline ends, or once ended, as the case may be. It's so detailed, and if it goes down too far, then he's not allowed, he's not wearing tefillin. So along comes the Torah, and the Torah says there's an idea of bringing sacrifices. When you bring sacrifices, the Torah starts out talking about voluntary sacrifices. You're allowed to volunteer. I decide I want to volunteer a sacrifice. So the commentaries ask, well, that's out of character for a Torah that's so precise. All of a sudden, well, if you feel like it, you can donate a korban. Various types of, some are mandatory, some are voluntary. Not mandatory. You can bring one. I'm in a good mood, bring a korban. I did a questionable aveira, a sin. You know what? I better bring one to clear my conscience. Torah allows you to volunteer. Why is that? And the answer is that in life, imagine the following scenario. Imagine a husband at the end of Shabbos walks into the kitchen, doesn't say a word to his wife, walks into the kitchen, approaches a sink full of dishes, rolls up his sleeves, getting ready, he's going to become a national hero here. And he's going to do the dishes without telling his wife. And, and just as he's already seeing it, he sees the picture on the wall, there's the Chazon Ish, and there's the Chafetz Chaim, there's him in the middle, because he did the dishes. And he's about to go to it, and he's about, and just as he's about to start, he hears a voice from the other room, "Harold, can you please wash the dishes?" Just let out all the air. Just let out. Well, I was going to do it anyway. So now the woman who wanted to please, now there's going to be a fight because she's not letting him please her the way he wants to please her. Think about the irony. And therefore, what happened here? But he was going to do the dishes anyway. The answer is he was originally going to do them as a volunteer. Now he's being told what to do. Nobody likes to be told what to do, especially those of us who were created first. Men do not like to be told what to do. And therefore, a man is told what to do. Oh, that changes everything. Imagine you walk into a shul. I'm going to ask you a question. I think we've all experienced this at some point or other. You walk into a shul, there 2 men are davening. One man is yawning. He's putting on his tefillin. He's not sure if he put the head on the arm on the head. He's kind of, he's all over the place. You got another guy who's, he's with the shuckle, he's in a rhythm. He's burning up calories. There he is in shul. And then I say to you, by the way, one of those men is a Bal Teshuva, and one is an FFB. Some say from birth, some say fractured from birth, whichever one it is. One of those men is a Bal Teshuva, one is an FFB. If you had a guess, if you had a bet, who would you bet on? Which one is the FFB and which one's the Bal Teshuva? And the answer is, we all know what you would say. Why is that? Why is it that the guy who's yawning was obviously born into it, and the guy who's dancing was not? There's an answer. The answer is because deep down inside, the Bal Teshuva feels, I don't really have to be doing this. God would forgive me. I only came to this when I was 25 or 30 or 50 or 90. God will forgive me. It's not my fault. The FFB knows he has no choice. I even know when I have students in yeshiva, I know when they've made that crossover. Because the day they fall asleep in shiur in a class, then I know, okay, this guy's an FFB now. He's officially an FFB. Because at the point that you have to do it, you feel there's no turning back. It's a basic insight to human nature. If I'm volunteering it, it's a volunteer. I don't have to do it. When you do it in your volunteer work, you do it with greater enthusiasm. A wife who decides to bake her husband a pie, a blueberry pie, she's going to surprise him. And on the way out of the house, as he leaves the door, he says, oh, by the way, blueberry pie would be really good for supper tonight. Big mistake, fellas, right? It's going to be tuna fish, right? And no dessert. You're going to open up a can of peaches, right? Why is it? She was going to do it. The answer is because now she's being told to do it, and it doesn't work that way in life. In life, a person does things with greater enthusiasm. That's why the Torah gives us the option of bringing volunteer sacrifices. Because when you volunteer in your service to God, you feel you're a volunteer, you're going to make a greater connection. The bond is stronger. You feel you're giving something, so to speak, to God. And that's what we're all looking for in life. We're looking for that area where we ourselves could feel we're giving something, not something that we're actually required to do. We're going above and beyond what the letter of the law requires. It could be anywhere, any area, because everybody in this room has is inclined in a different way. You have certain men who learn Torah with incredible devotion. They push themselves day and night. They go beyond the letter of the law, the requirement of the higisa bo yomam v'layla. You must learn Torah by day and by night. According to the letter of the law, if a man learns one word in the morning, one word at night, he has fulfilled his obligation. He can open up his chumash, Bereshis. That was a good learning session. Closes his chumash, right? Comes back at night, bara. In a week, he'll finish the first pasuk. He's fulfilled his obligation. A big Talmud Chacham he will not become, but he's fulfilled his obligation. You have other people who do chesed, helping everybody in the world. By the way, that includes your family. They help everybody in the world. You have other people who do tzedakah. You have other people who daven with devotion. It doesn't really matter. The Stipler Gaon says it does not matter as long as you pick the area that you are inclined and you go above and beyond. In that area where it's above and beyond, that's where you're going to feel the greatest connection to God, because that's the area you feel you're doing volunteer work. I was in Gateshead, city in northern England, for those of you who don't know. It's not very big. And I once had a meal with the Gateshead Rav, the current Gateshead Rav of Shraga Zimmerman, who is an American. And he told me an interesting incident took place. He gets a call one day from a non-Jew in Scotland. Calls him up, he says, "Are you the chief rabbi of the Jews?" He says, "Well, I'm the chief rabbi of Gateshead." He says, "I have a confession to make." He says, "Well, we don't actually do that sort of thing. You might want to go to a Catholic priest." He goes, no, this is regarding the Jews." He says, "Okay." He says, "I'm coming to your house." He comes into the house. He says, "Listen, I was on a visit to Europe. I went to one of the concentration camps. I went into one of the crematoria. I wanted a souvenir. So I took a stone out of the wall. And I got home and I thought to myself, you know what? I had pangs of conscience. I decided I don't know what to do. So I brought the stone, and here's the stone for you. You take care of it. Get somebody walks out. So the Rav told me that the first thing he had to determine was what the halachic status of the stone is, because if the stone has any sort of residue on it, any blood or human residue, then it has to be buried. Once he worked his way through that, he felt that wasn't an issue. Then the question becomes one of more sentimental. What do you do with a stone like that? It was pulled out of one of the crematorium. What do you do with that? According to halacha, you could toss it in the river. It's got no halachic requirements. So what do you do with it? So he told me he called his Rav Dovid Soloveitchik one of the Gedolei Ador, and he asked him, what should I do with the stone? So Rav Soloveitchik thought for 10 minutes, and eventually he said to him, there's a verse in the Nach that says, Even mikir tizok. The stone cries from the wall. He said that stone was crying out of that wall and was serving its function in creation. He was fulfilling his role in creation, crying out of that wall, evidence of what it had seen. Put it back. On your next trip, when you go, put the stone back. So the Yetzer Hara told me he went a month later. He happened to be on a trip. He put the stone back. He found the place, put the stone back in the wall. Every person in the world has a function. Every person was created for a specific role. A man once came to a Jew with 12 children, knocked on the door of another Jew. He said, listen, can you help me out? I have to marry them off. The finances are weighing heavily on me. Difficult to afford it. This wealthy man said to him, listen, it's your responsibility. You're going to have to take care of it. You know, I'm not getting involved. He said, no, it's not my problem. It's your problem. So the Jew, the father said to him, can I just ask you a question? Sure. He says, what would you do if I would offer you an opportunity to become a partner with Warren Buffett? A partnership. Would you want to take it? He says, yeah. He says, why? He says, well, you know, first of all, it's a big honor, and it would open up a lot of doors for me. People would see he trusts me. People see he relies on me. They would invest with me. Absolutely. So the Jew smiles. He says to me, you know, the Talmud says there are 3 partners in every child. There's the father, there's the mother, there's God. God's been my partner 12 times. What does that say about me? So, first understand, I'm sure he got a very big check. First understands every single human being has a partnership in him. God is a partner in that human being. That means he's got a role, he's got a job to do, he serves a purpose. And therefore every single person has to find out, where is that person? What is my role in life? In a medrash, mind-boggling medrash, the medrash says that there was a man on his way to Jerusalem during the time of the Beis Hamikdash, the temple. He was on his way on a pilgrimage up to Yerushalayim. And on his way, he saw 2 birds fighting. And one of the birds killed the other one. The dead bird is lying there. The living bird flew over, took a blade of grass out of the ground, flew over, touched it to the dead bird, and the dead bird came back to life. The guy said, hey, this is great. Grass that brings people to life. No pun intended. So he goes over and he takes a few of these blades of grass and decides he's going to go up to Yerushalayim, he's going to resurrect the dead. So on his way up, he wants to give it a test run, and he sees a dead fox at the side of the road. He walks over, touches the fox, and sure enough, the fox springs to life. He says, this is unbelievable. He keeps on going. For some reason, he wasn't convinced. He sees a dead lion at the side of the road. So he walks over and he brings the lion back to life. Well, apparently the lion, while dead, had not had anything to eat for a while. And that was the end of his journey to Yerushalayim. That's what the Medrash says. Now, there are a lot of lessons in that Medrash. One of them has to do with think before you do. That's one of the things, one of the lessons for sure. But I saw a different message here. The message of the Medrash is there's probably nothing more tragic in life than a waste of potential. The man's got the key to Tchias HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead, is in his hands. And instead of going and do that, he squanders it away on foolishness. There's nothing in life that's more tragic. Nothing in life more tragic. A person got potential, and that potential is not brought to its fulfillment. The person does not fulfill the potential. And therefore, every single one of us has to find that area of life where we have that inclination, where we have that energy, that voluntary energy, and that's where we grow. That's how we overcome all the distractions, because we're doing something that we really want to do. It's productive and it's eternal, and it brings out all of our potential. I know it's late. In Israel, this is the time that talks start, is about 10 o'clock at night. I know in America, people are telling me, wow, this is really a late evening. I mean, people, it's 10 o'clock at night, you know. Okay. Some of you work. We are victims of the society around us. We live in a society, you don't have to be a genius to know. It's a vulgar society. It's getting worse every day. And to a certain extent, society doesn't have any real direction. There's no definition. Where are we trying to go with all of this? People have to ask, where is all of this going? People say, well, we want to advance society. Advance to where? Where are you trying to get to? When I first got married, so we had to leave Chicago. My wife's from Columbus, Ohio. We had to drive from Chicago to Columbus. Chicago's here, Columbus is over here. Now, I'm not great with directions, and, getting out of Chicago, there are about 16 lanes on the highway. My dad gave me directions, and, it was one of those, you got it? I said, yeah, I think so. And we both know I didn't. We were young and foolish, and my wife and I got in the car to make the drive. We started driving, and you were driving for about a couple hours, and it's late at night, it's about 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. We're driving, and also we see a sign that says Detroit, 235 miles. Chicago's here, Columbus, Detroit's over here. It wasn't good. So I drove off the side of the road. I drove off the side of the highway, pulled into a truck stop, and there's a lady behind the counter. I said, hi, excuse me, and I guess I look kind of Jewish. And I said, can you help us? We're trying to I got to get to Columbus. She goes, well, just 1 second. She calls it, a lot of truckers. She says, Roy. One of the truckers comes over. He looked like he stepped out of Truckers magazine. Mutton chop, sideburns, with a beer in one hand, a beer in another, and a third in his mouth. He comes over, and Roy walks in. She says, Roy, can you tell this young man how to get to Columbus? So Roy puts up a leg on a chair because it's going to take a lot of thought. And he says, well, where are you coming from? So I said, Chicago. So he looks and he goes, boy, you messed up. And he calls the other truck driver. He says, Roy, they're all named Roy, by the way. He says, Roy, and they all came in, and everybody had a good laugh. And here we were, and I was not amused. But I learned another important life lesson: know where you're going. Otherwise, boy, you messed up, right? And that is stuck with you. It's a long time ago, and I'll never forget that, because a person needs to know where you're going. Where are we trying to get to? If you don't know where you're trying to get to, so what are you doing? What kind of steps are you taking? That's the society we live in. I had a young man came to me at the yeshiva once, and I asked him a question that stumps many people. He was about 21 at the time. So then we sat down to start talking, found out his background. He was attending Ohio State University. And I said to him, what's your goal in life? Be amazed how many people are baffled by that question. I said to him, what's your goal in life? He said, well, I'm the senior tuba player for the marching band. Ohio State University has a marching band. They come out, marching band, college band comes out and annoys people at halftime until they get the second half started. And he's the senior tuba player. He said to me, the senior tuba player at the biggest game of the year, Ohio State against Michigan, in the biggest game of the year, the marching band spells out the word Ohio State, Ohio. Said the senior tuba player has the singular honor of being the one who dots the I in the word Ohio. Said that was his goal in life. He wants to dot the I. And so I looked at him, no, really. And he was dead serious at the time. I was hoping he was planning on living more than 22, and that was his goal in life. So I thought about it afterwards. I realized, in Hebrew, a dot is called a dagesh. And a dagesh, the word dagesh, when you dot it grammatically, a dagesh means emphasis. So I realized, that's not his goal in life. He was speaking for a whole society, because the whole society's goal is to put the dagesh, the emphasis, on the I. That's the goal of the entire society. He was representative of an entire society. Today he's he lives in Los Angeles, he's got a family, he's got 3 children. At the time, that was his goal, to put the dot. That's the society we live in. It's about I. The dot is on the I. So what we need to do is we need to find our roles and somehow rise above that society. In Israel, there was once one of the rabbis was walking with one of his talmidim and one of his students, and they saw in the distance, the rabbi says to him, "Look over there, what do you see?" So the student looks out, he sees there's a shepherd boy, an Arab shepherd boy, surrounded by sheep. He says, "So tell me something, how old do you think that kid is?" He says, "I don't know, maybe 11, 12 years old." He says, "Yeah, I'd say so." "How many sheep do you think there are?" He says, "I don't know, looks like maybe 150, 200. He says, "Yeah, it sounds right." "How many hours a day do you think he's shepherding them?" "I don't know, 8, 10, 12. He says, "Yeah, let's say 10 hours. So you got a 12-year-old boy surrounded by 200 sheep, 12 hours a day. Wouldn't you think that he should be influenced by his environment, by what he's surrounded by? He should be crawling on all fours. How is it that he's still walking on two and he's surrounded by animals on all fours?" The answer is that he realizes that he's different than them. And if he realizes that he's different than them, he's not going to be influenced by them. And therefore, he doesn't crawl around. He walks on two. He's not influenced. He rises above the society around him. We're trying to rise above the society. And when we try to rise above the society, we have to be actively moving forward. When a person is enthusiastic in serving God, a person who does nothing feels better. A person who does something right when it's the correct thing to do. To help a little old lady cross the street, you walk away, you feel great. To help your spouse put the kids to sleep at night, you feel great. To help out an organization if they need tzedakah, you feel great. You've done the right thing. There's a good feeling. It's indescribable. Person understands that when they're serving God with enthusiasm, they've tapped into who they really are, and they're serving God that way, then a person feels, there's a certain feeling that a person has, and that feeling cannot be described. The New York Times, with this we almost conclude. The New York Times, many years ago, had to decide on a font that they were going to use for the print in the New York Times. And the board of directors met, and they settled on a font that does not dot the I. And the reason they did that is because they made a calculation. And they realized when you print about 8 or 10 million copies a day, in the course of 10 years, they would save millions of dollars on the ink that was not used to dot the I's. That means every single dot adds up. So sometimes we hear all sorts of ideas about people in bus compartments and little boys saying prayers. We say, "Listen, I'd like to get there, but it's a long distance from where I am right now." No, it's not. It's one dot at a time. It's one step at a time. Those little dots add up. The little dots, everybody makes strides. Everybody moves in that direction. It's within reach. We could do it. Everybody moves in a certain direction, and we achieve it, and we fulfill the potential that we've been given. Finally, I just want to tell you a story before the last one. There was a lady, there's a book out called Holy Woman. Many of you may have read it. I met Rabbi Kramer and his wife. I met them personally many, many years ago. And this Rebbetzin Kramer was asked by a young lady, the lady who wrote the book, she was asked by her, this lady had been all over the world. She'd been in an ashram somewhere in India, wherever it was, the ashram. And the young lady said to her, Rebbetzin Kramer had been in Auschwitz, and she had been worked on by Mengele. And she said to her, "What was it like in Auschwitz?" Now, you stop and think to yourself, anytime we've ever heard that word, people struggle with various adjectives to describe how bad it was. And this Rebbetzin Kramer, who had been in Auschwitz, she said, "Oh, Auschwitz wasn't such a bad place." Well, he said to her, "What? No one has ever, I've never in my life ever heard anybody say something like that." She said, "Auschwitz wasn't such a bad place." She said, "How can you say that?" She said, "Look, we had a siddur, we had a tehillim, we were able to daven, we were able to do mitzvahs. As long as you can daven, as long as you can do mitzvahs, it's not so terrible. Now, an ashram, that's a terrible place. Because in an ashram, you can't serve God. That's a terrible place. A Torah Jew feels, as long as I can serve, and I can serve, I have room to volunteer, do it my way. There's nothing in the world that brings out a person's potential. Nothing in the world feels better. Finally, there was a king running through a forest. I heard this story from Rav Zev Lev Shlita. And the king is running through the forest. The bandits are chasing the king. And, the king is running away, and he sees a little hut at the end of the forest, and he barges in. He says to the guy, quickly, hide me. The bandits are after me. They want to kill me. So the guy says to him, look, I haven't got a room to hide you. Come into the back room. Takes him to the back room. There's a very wide bed. He says, get on the floor under the bed. Move all the way against the wall. Maybe they won't notice you. So the king goes in, slides under the bed, goes all the way to the wall. 10 minutes later, the bandits arrive. They search the house. And one of the bandits walks into the room where the king is hiding. So he goes into the room and he looks around the room. He looks under the bed. He doesn't see anything. But just to make sure, he pulls out his sword. And he pokes it as far as he could under the bed. The sword comes about 1/4 of an inch from the king's nose. The king's looking at the sword. The guy pulls it out, checks for blood. There's no blood. He pokes it again to make sure. And again, it comes within about 1/2 inch of the king's nose. Takes a look, no blood. The bandits leave. Okay. 10 minutes later, the king's search party, the entourage arrives. They pull the king out from under the bed. The king says to the man, well, you know how it goes in these stories. Now you get to ask for anything you want. You've saved my life. So the guy says, well, I'll tell you the truth. I don't want much. I don't have much. I don't need much. There is one thing I want. I want to know what was going through your mind when that sword was 1/2 inch from your nose. And the king goes ballistic. The king explodes in rage. Says, you insolent fool. You could have had anything you wanted. That nonsense. You could have had gold, silver, anything you wanted. That's what you asked me for? That's what you care about? And not only that, you insult me in front of my men? You imply I can't give you more than that? I sentence you to immediate execution. Calls out the big guy with the portable chopper, and he calls him out. He says, at the count of 3, chop off his head. 1, 2, don't chop. The guy goes, that's what it felt like. That's what it felt like. Says, what? He says, I'm not upset. Says, what do you mean? He says, listen, you have a right to ask what it felt like. You want to know what it feels like to be within an inch of death? How can I possibly explain that to you? It's like people say, what's parachuting like? What's skydiving like? Well, it's like eating marshmallows, but different. I mean, how can you possibly explain what skydiving is like? People want to know, I wonder what heroin is like. Well, drink Pepsi and you'll know, but not really. What kind of question is it? So a guy comes along and says, I want to know what's it like to be within an inch of death. Okay, what am I going to do? Give you a verbal description? You know what? How does it feel now? You felt like you were about to die. That's what it felt like to have that sword 1/4 inch from my nose. There's no way to describe the experience, the fulfillment that a person gets when he fulfills his role as a Torah Jew. It can't be described. The world outside looks at us, they're clueless. They have no idea what's going on in our lives. We live among other people, they look at us, and they're absolutely clueless. And the Torah says, and with this we conclude, the Torah says that Ephraim and Manasseh, the Torah says, they will live on land. They'll be surrounded. They'll be like fish. Compares them, v'yidgu l'rov b'kerev ha'aretz. They're compared to fish. And the commentaries explain, what does that mean? V'yidgu l'rov. The plain meaning is they'll proliferate like fish. One of the commentaries says, when you stand around a pond of water and you see fish, you see them, you're clueless, you have no idea what's going on in a fish's world. You try to imitate a fish in your daydreams and you start coughing, thinking about what it's like to breathe water. You can't admit, a bird, yeah, a fish, no, we're clueless. We cannot imagine breathing water. The Yidgu L'Rov B'Kerev Ha'aretz, you're going to live among the other nations. But you're going to be living a life, they'll see you. There you are, you're right there. They think they know what you are and who you are. They're clueless, they have no idea, they can't imagine what's going on in a Torah life. And a Torah Jew who's living a life of fulfillment, that life cannot be imagined by another Jew who's not. And therefore, we end with the tefillah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help us all. We should be zocheh, we should merit to fulfill our potential, to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with enthusiasm, and to experience the fulfillment of the pasuk, Tamur Ukitov Hashem. Experience it, and you'll see how good it is to be a servant of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Good night, everybody.